Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Cheng, and today we have three panelists with us. We have Georgina, who just spoke, and she's the head of special events, strategic partnerships, Asia Pacific at Christie's. She's responsible for conceiving and delivering a best-in-class events program that drives client acquisition and engagement in this region. Georgina is also an auctioneer, taking some of the most prominent sales at Christie's, including flagship evening sales. She has been awarded the Novus Auctioneer of the Year award by the National Association of Valuers and Auctioneers. And prior to coming to Hong Kong, you spent 5 years in London with Christie's. And then we have Elaine Ng from Fabrick Lab. She's not only the founder, she has been nicknamed the Techno Fairy by Elle Decor. And Fabrick Lab brings together textiles, electronics, interiors, and installations. She's also a TED Fellow and has been globally recognized by multiple design awards, including the Emerging Talent Award by Design Anthology and GGEF's Eco Innovator Award. And at Art Basel last year, 2019, she was commissioned by UBS to create an original work designed to instigate conversations about sustainability with data, art, and design. And we have Daniel Pyett from Lotus Fine Arts. He's the Hong Kong manager for Lotus Fine Arts and the specialist fine art shipper. Originally from the UK, he's experienced in art installation, packing, storage, and the shipping industry. You've been in Hong Kong and Singapore for 8 years with major galleries, auction houses, museums, and private collectors, and worked in commercial galleries, shipping agents in London. Welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to look at a discussion at how the art world as an industry can be more sustainable and how the current environment may be the catalyst for the new online approach. So we'll aim for the discussion to be around 50 minutes and maybe leave 10 minutes for any questions. It's a big topic, so I'm just going to dive right in. Perhaps the first question for Georgie and Elaine. So sustainability has really been a focus for many industries in the past year. The United Nations has set out 17 Sustainable Development Goals to achieve by 2030. What has the art world already done before COVID-19? Georgie?
Sure, so I'll start. I think the art world has been criticized in recent years for having such a negative impact on what is the real world. I think various aspects of the industry contribute to that, and I'm sure we'll go into that in more detail throughout this discussion. But talking about the commercial art world specifically, I think, we rely upon our art experts, the works of art, and the collectors all coming together. And when those three components do come together, there's an awful lot of travel, shipping, logistical setup, extravagant events, and that equates to an awful lot of carbon waste. So there are huge challenges involved. And I think only in the last couple of years have we started to see some real progress. Last year, the art newspaper did report that the art world was finally going green. And I think that was down to some of the big players suddenly speaking up and setting some sort of strong, brave initiatives to address this. Christie's, I know, for example, came up with a quite bold publishing initiative last year, deciding to cut 50% of all printed materials. Some of the major art fairs, for example, like Frieze, collaborated with Extinction Rebellion through activations, talks, and fundraising events. Art Basel was due to have a big sustainability summit this year. Many of the galleries have become very active in this space. I think with the galleries, there's a lot of using the power of art and the artists that they're working with to send that strong message about the environment. The museums, of course, are active here.
Artists express their own views and desire for a more sustainable world through their artwork. For Elaine?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of more of these sort of freedom of expression through work, and there's one of my sort of favorite artists, Colin Flanagan. She created a work called Zoe, and it's basically a sea sculpture to really promote the idea how can sea life sort of reform themselves through sculpture, as sculptures being created under the sea. That is some sort of art what you never really get to see in any art exhibitions, but you have to rely on the cameras being installed in the sea. So it is the change of momentum, how people can actually physically touch or not touch, and they turn digital, people are more forgiving of not able to see the artwork, but try to understand and digest the content of it rather. I think that's quite a significant change with the artwork. And also one of the recent pieces I was working with UBS, it's quite abstract. I was working with the data to create artwork, to instigate conversations rather to just present the artwork, aesthetic piece of work. It has to engage physical engagement of going through a data set that people are interested in order for them to understand the change of air quality, to then to think and create a conversations among themselves of how are they impacting, or the industrial activities in certain regions are impacting data or air quality. And actually, the air quality is reflecting on humans' activity, and that's what's generating the data. So a lot of people think, how could data and technology be directly linked with artwork? And I think a lot of artwork are really related with science and also technology nowadays as a shift.
So what about the galleries and the art fair organizers and auction houses? Maybe Daniel and Georgie want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I mean, obviously I'm coming at this from the commercial angle, being an art shipper, and moving things around is, you know, and all that carbon footprint is kind of inherent in what we do. But I think you know, things are on the change, things are moving. I think there is you know, the zeitgeist is on the shift, and I think, you know, the forces are going to come from all sides. I mean, you know, from my perspective at this moment, there is, you know, there's limited movement, but I mean, it's still very new, and I mean, I think the will is there. I mean, I think most people in the art world, you know, they don't deny the big issues, and they'd love to make, you know, do something about it, and do something sooner rather than later. I mean, obviously, you know, galleries, art fairs, and auction houses are commercial organisations who, you know, are responsible to their business models and their shareholders. So this is not going to happen overnight, but you know, I think they, you know, they want to do it, and also the more the clients, you know, begin to expect it because of the overall, you know, zeitgeist, as it were. I mean, I think you know, things will begin to move. I mean, as I say, I think as of this moment, you know, from my perspective, it's not, there's not been too many changes just yet. I mean, there's a lot of kind of, you know, ideas out there. There's a lot of window dressing out there at the moment. But, you know, there's still a lot of things being shipped around at the moment, which is, you know, for our business is good. But, you know, I think you know, the ideas are out there, and things will move sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think what you touch on there about the commercial organizations and what are they motivated by to make these changes, because of course everyone recognizes we're all driven by like big profit targets and things, and so why should we be motivated to focus on this other than, of course, the strong ethical standpoint? But I think actually those business reasons are becoming more and more apparent. I think if you look at our client base, I think now the majority of the client base are in that millennial bracket, and millennials do value this hugely, and I think they will start to make decisions based on this. And companies and industries which are falling out of favor and appearing as hugely negative for the environment won't appeal to them, and so I think actually their behavior will start dictating some of the change. And also this group and how they're engaging with companies, if they're very happy to view works online and to trust the advice of others and use all of the information that is available on the internet, then that will in turn change how the organizations are dealing with them, which is having less of a negative impact on the planet. So I think to run the risk of alienating your client base is one of the reasons why the commercial organizations will start to address this. but also the business reasons around the vast amount that is currently spent on energy and electricity and business class flights and all of this setup is arguably very inefficient in today's world. So I think reviewing all of those costs and all of that spend will in turn allow businesses to reduce the amount of budget that they're spending on these things. So that's another way of looking at it. And finally, I think probably in the future, carbon waste is going to come with a big price tag on it. So if we wait until that moment, then you'll end up going to have to spend a huge amount on that. But if you get yourself aligned now and become more of a low carbon economy company, then you will avoid those costs down the line. So I think, yes, there's all of the sort of important moral reasons that we should be considering this, but actually there are huge business reasons too.
So who do you guys think is in the best position to push for these changes? It sounds like from Georgie's description of the new millennial clients that maybe it is a consumer world and people can vote for the dollars. So maybe they can become the biggest push. But do you see any leaders that are taking a bigger step? Or, you know, are the galleries doing more than the exhibition organizers? Are the auction houses doing more than the artists, or is it really a collaborative effort?
I think as artist designers, I think there are certain responsibility that could be down to designers themselves to sort of promote the idea or to design a smart solution for packaging and creates design, because I think a lot of the commercial auction houses, they will go for the traditional route because it is there and ready and they think it is the most reliable, because at the end of the day, protection is one of the key. But there are so many sort of material designers out there, and packaging is probably one of the least that's being looked at as not the sort of the first priority, but actually there are same piece of artwork being shipped multiple times, and there's multiple crates being made. And I think if we putting like carbon footprint and wasted material as a cost as a whole, then when you design it, that should be something that's part of the design solution, rather than just looking at how do we minimize the packing space so then actually it's cheaper, lower cost on the air freight alone, but it's actually the lifespan of it and how it can be fit into multiple different type of artwork.
So being more creative and having a little bit more planning on the shipment. So I've asked a few questions that kind of jumped around, but let's get to the reality of what it is now. So we're in a Zoom meeting and there are other attendees watching us right now because not more than 4 people can meet up in the same spot in Hong Kong, and we respect that. And I think today's cases has gone down below 20, so exciting news. But we are a couple months into this new normal, and the COVID-19 epidemic has changed the way we all act socially and professionally. We're on Zoom, house party, Google Meet, or whatnot. And I was just told by my friends that you can have your local bars deliver your favorite cocktail concoction to your house to have a Zoom happy hour with your friends. So that has changed all of our behaviors. So how are some of the leading players in the art world, what have they done because of COVID-19? And looking at what they've done, are there any surprises that are positive or negative? Maybe Georgie and Daniel want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you only have to look around to see all organizations making a concerted effort to have much more of an online and digital engagement with their clients, which is great to see. And this has definitely been catalyzed in the last couple of months for sure. So lots of exciting things to come out of it. I mean, I think, to be honest, one of the most exciting things in Hong Kong is Art Power HK, which has successfully unified all of the leading players on one digital online platform, which arguably didn't really exist in this space before in Hong Kong. And I think that is going to see lots of positive change, even though that wasn't necessarily a solution to sustainability, and it was very focused on keeping momentum going during a time when we couldn't have physical events. actually what it's proven is that you can still have those moments together, but just in a virtual space. And I think the scope to which that can grow is huge. And I think apart from anything else, in the times that we're facing now, it's so important to make unified decisions as an industry, not least about what direction we're going with the commercial art events that were planned in Hong Kong this year. But maybe this platform could also be used down the line as a way of making unified decisions around sustainability and various other factors. So I would say, yeah, one of the most exciting innovations is this, but of course you've seen lots of amazing things around viewing rooms, the way in which we're sharing artwork with clients, the way in which we're visiting artist studios online. I mean, every day there's a multitude of different things to engage with online. So it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's from our perspective, you know, it's certainly, you know, it's risen up as to how people can view, you know, in a commercial sense, how people can view the artworks. You know, in my parent company in Germany, they've been having conversations with major galleries about their virtual viewing rooms and being able to, you know, take very high quality images of artworks, potentially even three-dimensional quality images of artworks, and then, you know, send that, you know, digitally to the clients to stop this the travel that can't be done at this moment. So I mean, it's definitely you know, generating these kind of, you know, ideas for how to get around this restriction on movement. But then, of course, you know, the issue ongoing from here, which is saving travel and the need for people to be running around all the time. I mean, obviously, you know, the viewing rooms that Art Basel pioneered after Art Basel Hong Kong was cancelled is a similar concept. It's a way of showing the clients the art without them having to, you know, be there in person, maybe not having to move the artworks. You know, the artworks can stay where they are. They don't have to ship anywhere. The client doesn't have to go and see them. They can see them online. So I think these are the exciting, you know, potentials that this is generating, and no doubt will go forward from here.
And Elaine, anything from the artist side?
I think it actually helps to promote digital art a lot, because there's always been sort of slightly skeptical about, like, it's digital art as valuable as a traditional physical painting, and is that as much technique? But actually there's huge amount of work within the coding and the programming and the digital sort of artisan work. And I think people start to appreciate more, and actually you can do a physical download from site to site, so that can also reduce the problem of not able to ship, because sort of all digital platforms are very reliable now. And I do have, like, sort of events and clients that we've been using sort of different types of projections and 8K sort of digital work. So I think it opens up more opportunity for artists in any case, rather than restricting the opportunity. And hologram, you know, all these fun things.
Just one point to add to that. This isn't something I know a huge amount about, but I think it's worth also considering that there is a carbon footprint attached to digital. And something that I read the other day was that if you send 20 emails in one day, that equates to the same carbon waste as driving 1,000 kilometers in a car. So I think whilst moving to a marketplace where you're buying and selling digital works of art, it would be interesting to see actually the carbon waste of building something so complex like that. And I wonder what that looks like. Rather than, of course, the traditional art market, which is ultimately recycling works of art from the past, which have been handed down from generation to generation to generation. And they're things that are treasured, and once they're on your wall, require very little upkeep. So I just wonder whether taking a really long-term approach to this, if it's actually a model that would also create quite a lot of carbon waste in the long term. Be interesting to see.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Actually, that sort of gave me a thought that with sort of traditional physical artwork, all you need to do is keep it well, and you can always take it out and install it. But actually with digital work, think about the VHS tape, you know, if you don't have the machine anymore, you can't play it if it's part of the installation. So there's so many generations of hard drives and even USB keys. So it is a concern and worries of how compatibility moves on as generation of technology moves on. So that might be something quite interesting of like how artwork over some digital artwork disappeared because of the mismatch of these technology moving on so quickly, and people forgot about that.
This is open to all three of you. I'm just curious, do you see the digital art segment attracting a completely different clientele, and therefore for the art world to move into a more sustainable way of conducting, you actually have to convince a group of collectors that are more prone to collecting traditional artwork versus this potential new audience that going online or being virtual is able to attract?
I think having worked on the Christie's Art and Tech Summit last year, this opened up a whole new world to me. And we sold the first work of art last year created by AI. And this year we're due to sell the first work of art, which is a mixed reality piece. And I think there are many reasons why the art world is moving in this direction. Firstly, of course, because the artists are beginning to experiment with technology as a method of creating art. But also, where is the wealth coming from today, and where are our collectors going to be coming from? Largely entrepreneurs who are making a huge amount of money in the tech world. So how are we going to engage with them as an industry? And I wonder whether, as you see these emerging technologies and things creeping into the art world, I wonder if that's a byproduct of that and trying to speak to this new audience. And yeah, I mean, an exciting element of that is that you then are introduced to a whole new realm of collectors. And then their tastes will start to dictate collecting patterns down the line and what things are making the highest prices.
So I introduced the three of you, and a little introduction for myself. I'm actually the co-founder of Drive Hong Kong, and we focus on one simple message: raising the awareness of using less single-use plastics. So when we formed about 18 months ago, we had a really hard time convincing all these cafes to stop using plastic straws, to stop giving them out for free. And then 12 months ago, we had some of them come back to us and say, hey, we're doing it now. Can you help us tell everybody? And now, I mean, if you guys walk into a coffee shop or whatnot and they don't give you a plastic straw with your iced tea, you know, you won't think twice about it. You're like, okay, this is quite normal. So our model really was start small, start now. So people started with straw. So what is the plastic straw equivalent in the art world? And if, you know, as an individual, I want to start making a change now, can I approach art collection in a more sustainable way? And how would I do it? Who do I have to convince to make it happen? Daniel, you want to chime in on this?
Well, I mean, I guess the plastic straw of the art world is probably, you know, packing materials, I guess, you know, bubble wrap and so on. Yeah, you know, I mean, there's, you know, miles of it used at an art fair or an auction. And yeah, I mean, it's just goes in landfill. It's definitely our responsibility in the coming years to you know, come up with better options on that front. I mean, you know, whether that be, I mean, you know, you have these practical issues there. I mean, which is, you know, particularly if you're shipping artwork, that, you know, you need to have a moisture barrier. You know, you can't, you know, particularly if they're going sea freight, you know, you need to stop moisture getting inside the artwork. And obviously plastics are very good at stopping moisture as a moisture barrier. So, you know, we have to, you know, bit by bit evolve, you know, new materials to step into this void, whether those are kind of waxed papers or waxed cardboards or, you know, biodegradable rubber products. I'm not sure yet. I mean, it's still early days, but yeah, I mean, packing material is most certainly a horrendous waste in the modern art world. I mean, you know, now, I mean, the crating side of shipping artworks around, I mean, is also incredibly wasteful. I mean, building bespoke crates for each movement of an artwork. You know, I think Elaine was quite right in a way. You know, maybe artists have to start to think about this a bit more. You know, maybe, you know, if you, I mean, in recent years, it seems like paintings get bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, maybe they don't need to be quite that big, or maybe when you know, it's literally designed to be rolled up and installed on site without needing a vast crate or packing solution, so things can sort of pack down into smaller volumes. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, the packing crate thing we're beginning to deal with to an extent. I mean, there's many companies now making these recyclable crates that can be retrofitted time after time, so that an artwork can be fitted in and not need all the packing foam and stuff that just, again, as I say, just gets straight in the landfill after every shipment now. I mean, there's a couple of companies now, particularly in Europe, including my own parent company, who are producing crates that can be, they have systems inside that can be adjusted to hold the artwork, and then that crate, once it's made one shipment, can be reused time and time again. I mean, of course, the one of the issues that you have with this is that, you know, if it's a single direction shipment, you need to get that crate back again. But I mean, that's another thing that's happening in my industry sector, which is more of a globalization, which in this case might actually be beneficial, because if you have, you know, literally a DHL of the art world, where you can, you know, have crates going backwards and forwards with artworks, that's going to save an awful lot of you know, waste. So yeah, I mean, I guess to me the plastic straw of the art world is packing materials. I mean, of course, you know, the art fairs themselves, the waste that goes into building up art fairs is a huge issue. But I hear that, you know, a lot of the fairs are now beginning to deal with that. You know, they're recycling the wall structures, and they're storing them, and you know, the flooring and all these things that in the past have just been disposed of directly after the art fair. I mean, they're beginning to be recycled, which is a great you know, step forward. You know, I mean, again, another one of these issues is art storage. I mean, there's huge, you know, again, it's my business, but there's huge volumes of artwork being stored all over the world now, and of course, you know, the efficiency of the, you know, the storage venues have to be climatically controlled, you know, to make sure that the humidity and temperature is suitable. So of course that has a significant carbon footprint, you know, particularly in a Hong Kong summer. So I think, you know, that's another way in which, you know, which needs to be conquered, and we'll get on top of in the years to come. So yeah, there's quite a number of plastic straws.
Well, low-hanging fruits are good. So if you know where the plastic straws are, then it actually makes it easier. To your point, you're right. There are a lot of plastic alternative, and usually the issue is with cost. And it's easier to get an industry to use alternative that's more expensive when the margin is a little bit higher. So it's difficult to ask a small company to change all the plastic packaging into this special dissolvable plastic when their margin is razor thin, and it's easier to ask luxury goods or goods just with a high margin to make that change, because it's kind of easier for the consumer and everybody involved to take a little bit of the cut. So hopefully that will happen. George, do you see that? Yeah.
I think it's rather like the plastic straws, though, isn't it? I mean, with a change in kind of intellectual environment and kind of zeitgeist environment, people will begin to expect these things, and when they expect them, and when they see things still using plastics and non-recyclable products, there'll be a stigma that begins to be attached to that. And so the clients will be expecting it, and of course that's when, at that point, the commercial viability becomes more and more necessary, in fact.
So I think many different players, the artists, the art show organizers, have come up with solutions during this time, but it's really for crisis management. So if we have to cancel a show, what can we do instead of it? And it's about trying to maintain what they expect to happen. So with the virtual viewing rooms, the different way of visiting artist studios, do you guys expect those things to be long-term? The last big disruption was probably the financial crisis in 2008. And I would say the world pretty much jumped back to normal within 12 to 18 months, and everything was fine. So do you think some of these creative solutions that are used during this trying time, do you think they have potential to be long-term solution? And what have some of the biggest achievement that you've seen that you think will be able to maintain going forward? And what are some of the things that you have seen that you think, when people can start flying again, they probably would get rid of it? Elaine?
Yeah, I just want to sort of go back a little bit to your last question. I mean, it's sort of addressing both questions. Time is I think is one of the sort of plastics equivalent of plastic straws issue, because whenever you set up an art show or preparation, you get so little time, and because you have so little time, all the sort of art handlers or the assistant, they will sort of remove all the packaging materials as quickly as possible and put them into waste. But actually, if you have a little bit more time, they can really be reused, because half of them are 90% new. But because we're really racing with time, it's every time we set up the show, it's nearly the very last minute until the first visitor enter the entrance. We're like, finish. But if this organizer can allow it to have a little bit more breathing space, I think everyone can then work slightly better. And saying that, because everyone are so reliant on the physical interactions because they're used to it, they think this digital platform is not reliable. The connections that we're worried about, like how much you can go through and how convincing you can talk through a project. But because this period, people think we're going to write off the entire 2020, but actually it's a really good time for us to try out different models, to gain trust in new system and platform. And I'm really hoping people are not going to write off anything we're using now, instead of actually learning, adopting, and improvise it to integrate back to what we are used to in a traditional way, but improved it. So for example, the viewing room, I think it's a great idea. It opens up dialogues for people to think about how they can give more time to one-to-one person. There's sort of clients that I used to have, they would never have time for me. They would rather say, when I see you, Elaine, we'll talk through it. But there's no when I see you anymore, because there's no more flights. So they would then make time for me to see me on internet. So I think there are quite a lot of positive things that we can take from this period, because I mean, it is sad that it's not a 1 month sort of restriction we have is looking, we're not having like 9 months of period that we have to go through. So we really have to treat this as a new way of living, instead of saying, oh, this is how we've been restricted, but actually think about this is the external sort of breathing space that we have that we never thought we could have.
And Elaine, you're so right when you talk about time being the plastic straw, because you know, when we do a campaign at EcoDrive trying to tell people to stop using disposable products, what does that really mean? It's just, it buys you convenience. That's what it is. And we always say that if people understand the true cost of just being a little bit more convenient, like what if you understand what it is, then you won't do it. If you understand what it takes to actually recycle a PET bottle, the cleaning, the sorting, the separation, you'll be like, forget it. I will just drink it from a mug, but people don't know. So you're right, when they're unpacking everything, time is of the essence and everything becomes disposable as a result of it. But if legislation or if organizers start making it a rule, you have to sort your garbage, for example, then the packers will be a lot more careful when they're unwrapping and everything, because it comes with a cost. But right now it's free and time is not. So you were absolutely correct in time being a metaphoric plastic straw. But Georgie, you were going to add to the creative solutions that may or may not be long-term?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting to be having this conversation now and in the context of the virus. And there's been a lot of conversations around how the sole beneficiary of this horrendous environment that we're all living through at the moment is the planet, because with the large majority of the world's population under quarantine, carbon emissions are obviously at an all-time low. And you can see that definitely in the art industry. But what I worry is that when we come out of this and we're going to be focused entirely on, well, countries are going to be focused entirely on building the economy back up, businesses are going to be focused on making up for a whole lost half of growth, commitments towards well thought out sustainability initiatives in organizations may well fall by the wayside. And I think definitely if we look globally, we'll see probably a spike in emissions as people are really trying to make up for that lost time. So I think it's thinking very carefully about what we can do in the art industry to avoid that, and to really focus on changing our consumer habits and our client habits long term at this stage. And I think if any industry can do that, it is the art industry, simply by building these close relationships with our clients through these kind of technologies. I think we'll build that trust back up. And, you know, with platforms like Art Power as well, it enables us to keep that dialogue going long after this.
Going back to time as well, you know, if galleries and auction houses, you know, just planned better, you know, for shipments, obviously, you know, sea freight is a far more efficient and less carbon detrimental way of moving things around the world. So, you know, I mean, yes, if you have, you know, Art Basel, Hong Kong, and everything's got to ship from the US or the Europe, you know, to do that by sea freight is so much more efficient. But of course, it takes, you know, a month or 6 weeks. You know, you have to allow that time, whereas air freight can be done within a couple of days. So that element of organizations having to maybe plan ahead a bit more, that would have a huge benefit.
I think another alternative option to look into would be whether you could apply the same kind of F&B analogy as the straws, as encouraging collectors to buy locally sourced and, you know, local artists from local auction houses and local galleries, in order to avoid all of the shipping and the travel. But then you'd be running the risk of one of the risks would be deglobalizing the art market, and think how much tourism and business the art market brings to so many corners of the world. But I think as well as just looking at the shipping of the actual object, it's everything that goes on in addition to that, which is sort of unnecessary. And when you sort of focus in on Art Basel last year in Hong Kong and some of these fairs, it now seems like a totally ludicrously extravagant world in comparison to the times that we're living in now. And has it actually lost a lot of its meaning? Not the fair itself, but everything that goes on alongside it. Endless parties every night. Very little focus on the artists and the galleries themselves. It's the sort of flamboyance of the art world which has got a little bit out of control. And so I wonder whether when we come out of this, we'll focus a little bit more on like what's important and what's really meaningful. And maybe that will be a scaled down version, but maybe that won't be less. It won't necessarily be less transactions. It will just be focusing on what's really meaningful to make that happen.
It's true, right? Part of the fun of being in the art world is to socialize, and whether it's seeing the artwork up and close, or just having a nice party and talking to people, and whether it's talking to artists or collectors, can that social experience be replicated online or virtually? Or is there a, because the viewing experience could be personal and alone, but there is a huge connected social part of it that is difficult to take away. I always joke that, that it's Art Basel in Hong Kong when you see people illegally crossing the street from Landmark Mandarin over to New World, because there is no light, and all these travelers come in and they're like, oh, I need to go over there, and you see them crossing the street with their amazing outfits and their clutch bags and their heels and everything, and you're like, oh, Art Basel is in Hong Kong now. So there's that element of it that that would be difficult to replicate online. But do you see the new collectors, the new buyers, the younger generation interacting differently already with artists and fairs?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have so many different audiences, and as my role in events, obviously this is something that I'm grappling with on a daily basis at the moment. What is the future of events, and are we going to be able to engage with our clients in those traditional ways? And actually, it's a great opportunity to rethink what we're doing. I think when you think of the collectors and what it takes for someone to become a collector of art, such a small amount of people, and it's such a psychological journey that they've gone through based on so many different relationships with specialists in the art that they collect, maybe the artists themselves, and also that fundamental experience of standing in front of a piece and really developing an eye for works by a certain artist or from a certain time. And that is very hard to recreate online. I think you can supplement it and you can continue to share information, but I can't imagine a world where someone can become a collector without having numerous occasions and moments in front of the works that they grow to love and search for on a daily basis. But that, again, is a very small amount of people. It's then the kind of emerging collectors who I think are willing to engage a lot more online and have just various moments throughout the year where they're seeing these things in person. And I think the way in which we're working with those people and cultivating their interests can definitely change a bit. I think a lot around education is actually what they're looking for, to really grow an understanding of the market and the trends. And a lot of these people are interested in art as an investment. So looking at how you can engage them with topics like that rather than just the champagne clinking and various social events throughout the year. And then there's the people who are just starting to understand the art world. And I think that audience is very engaged online, and there's lots of exciting things that you can be doing to talking to them in a way that they are still interacting with the specialists. I don't think, again, you can completely replace the in-person moments, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to supplement them.
Elaine, any point from the artist? Do you want to talk to your collectors online with no specific fair? Is it easier or is it harder?
Well, a lot of people interested in my work are more interested in the concept and the research behind it. So they definitely want to spend more time to sort of listen to the research. So a lot of time at fairs, it's a very quick sort of introduction or have a look at the work, but a lot of people that actually spend a little more time having meetings with me afterwards rather than spend time just looking at the work. So I mean, a lot of my work is about textures, about interactivity, so it is quite difficult for me to explain the work without having seen the physical work. at least once. But it's good to build up the conversations and get them to understand it. But I'm very sort of physical person. I like to meet people. As much as I love having parties on the internet, I do love seeing people in person. So I do miss that, because I've been not having real interaction for people for months now.
Well, speaking of interaction, we have a question coming from somebody watching us right now. So from Romar Delay, sorry if I did not pronounce it properly, but his question is, we've discussed the wasteful parts of the art industry that creates carbon footprint and lessening it, packaging, etc. What about initiatives to offset the carbon footprint for the inevitable business operations? So things that we can't cut, not the plastic straws, but things that need to happen. Are there activities done by different players within the value chain to try and offset those carbon footprint?
I think it's an interesting option, but it should be option B. I think first of all, the commercial art world has got a long way to go of firstly looking at the data. None of the big players have actually come out with a report to show what their carbon footprint actually is. So it's very difficult for anyone to build a strategy around a general feeling that it's incredibly wasteful and where that waste is coming from. And I think we're in a position this year that we're going to start seeing some very detailed reports coming from some of the major auction houses and art fairs, which will allow us to then build a strategy around what is possible, where can we cut, how much do we want to cut, and where we physically can't. And where we can't, I think then offsetting is an interesting option. But ultimately, I don't want to say it's the lazy option, but I feel like we've got a long way to go before we resort to that. But yeah, certainly it'd be interesting to look into.
I mean, I think offsetting, is a great idea, because, inherently a lot of art is tangible, and as long as people own things, it's likely to have to move around every so often. So there will be a carbon footprint with moving a physical thing every so often. So, I mean, if there is ways in which that can be offset, and that's a good thing. And the more of that can go on, the better.
Another question. Oh, this is specific to logistics. I think Daniel, you might have covered this a little bit earlier as well, but I'm going to ask it anyways. So regarding logistics, are there actually alternatives out there? So somebody can demand to, do an event plastic-free. Can somebody demand a piece of artwork to be shipped in a sustainable manner? Are there operators out there that would cover that request?
As I say, I think it's still pretty early days. I mean, these ideas are in this sort of gestation, really. I mean, as I say, the sort of sustainable or the reusable crate side of things, that really started with the museums, actually. Quite a few years ago, 10 years ago maybe, and that's just beginning to filter down with the awareness of the other issues. I mean, the music, I guess a lot of stuff can start in the sort of non-profit sector than the museums, because they have more resources maybe, and more time to consider things, and less shareholders to be responsible to. But of course, these ideas will come down the line eventually. And yeah, I mean, at the moment there are options to ship in reusable crates. I mean, if somebody comes to me and says, can we, I don't want you to make a new crate for this, can you find an old one, or one that's going to be disposed, we would do everything we can to make allowances for that. But yeah, I mean, it's still early days, and we're only just beginning to think about the options and how we could cater for, not just cater for the market, but cater for the future of of our carbon footprint. So yeah, I think that the best way to say in this is, in the commercial sector, it's definitely still early days.
Well, Frankie here wants me to say that the panelists that there are actually a lot of institutions that are starting to use fabric wrapping materials instead of tissue paper, and that seems to work well. So maybe it's just a matter of us trying to get a bit more creative.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Things like wax papers or reuse. I mean, certainly for packing oversized sculpture, you use. Actually, they've been used in the removals industry forever as blankets, because they're actually very good for protecting things. And then, I mean, we love it when a shipment arrives and it's been packed in blankets. We're very excited because we take them all off and stash them away and reuse them. So that's fantastic. But yeah, we need to get an awful lot more. There needs to be an awful lot more thought and more invention put into this. So hopefully, coming soon.
So we have about 6 minutes left. So I'm gonna ask this last question. And it's about the fact that we're in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is a hub. We're used to traveling all the time, hopping over to Cambodia for the weekend and whatnot before COVID. And so there's a lot of carbon footprint that comes from traveling. And we're also in a city that doesn't have a lot of regulations on environmental laws. Not a single reusable but disposable material is actually banned, not even styrofoam. And certainly we have a rather broken recycling system. So have you guys seen any examples of other places, having spent time in other places that have worked for the art world, in a particularly well manner? Are there other cities that have done it well? And can we emulate them? Or are there other industries that are similar and have policies or different creative ways to make it more sustainable? Well, maybe that's why we're still talking about it, because no one has really come up with anything that we could
Well, I mean, I think, as I say, I think the big art fairs are beginning to address this. I mean, certainly in I know Frieze in London, a lot of recycling going on there, and kind of addressing and welcoming the issues. So I mean, I guess Hong Kong's a very unusual place in lots of ways. I mean, it's a real kind of crossroads, isn't it? Which inherently means it's all about travel, people traveling in and out and through. And I mean, it's also a center of commerce and profit making. It's kind of almost represents all the enemies for what we're talking about. So if Hong Kong can make it work someday, then everyone should be okay.
I think a lot of the idea of being sustainability of not, it's very much about relativity of sort of what are the comparables. So for example, if it's an art show, it would be really nice to see early, like for the visitors, early to know. So if that show is going to be in Vienna, it will travel to China in Vienna. If down the line, say next year, so people will avoid to travel to London because they really want to see the show. But if they know it's going to be in the country a year ahead, then they will not make that trip. And also the packaging and planning, things will be made for cross countries traveling. And because a lot of regulations of different sort of imports and exports are very different from country to country, we have experienced a lot. We have to remake the crates because it's not under certain regulations, and so that sort of things, it'll be really nice. It become more transparent, so we understand early in the stage, even as an artist. So we start small and as an individual to be more considerate when we start making proposals to our sponsors. I think a lot of time the sponsor will tell us, oh, but you didn't mention the quotation early on, so it's not part of our budgeting. So it will be good. I'm sure a lot of individuals would love to be more considerate if they understand how. So if there's a platform to open up, that would be really good. But throughout the travel, I think is more product related, but Australia has been doing really well with the to-go cups and all the sort of sustainable use reuse platforms for all the building materials in museum I've seen so far, and I think they've done really well.
So we have 2 minutes left. Any last thoughts and any hopes and dreams for, if you had to pick one thing that you've seen that has happened in the past 3 months that you think this is working and this will continue to work regardless of whether we're in the coronavirus world, what would it be?
Art Power HK.
I must say, as a moderator, it's very interesting to do moderation on Zoom because it's very, very different, and I'm not sure who I should be looking at. So it is a learning process. I think we're all improvising, and whether we can cut on packaging, whether we can refuse the catalog. Our 3 R's is, reuse, reduce, and refuse. If somebody gives you something for free, you don't have to take it. So I think it's about sort of like what Elaine's saying, communicating, planning a little bit better. If I'm going to the show anyway, I don't really need the catalog because I will see the artwork itself. And I think people forget that, and it's a matter of habit. And maybe with all the availability of virtual viewing and better access to, gallery directly, client to gallery or client to artist, people people require fewer things to enhance their art collection experience. And it's going to be, like Georgina said, focusing on the real important aspects of the artwork, of the concept behind it. And hopefully every player will kind of hop on this sustainable bandwagon together, and everybody will be asking for the same thing. And then finally, everybody will be on the same timeline with a common goal in place. So maybe that is the hopeful thing that will come out of this quarantine, social distancing experience that we're all kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like parallel universe, but it's happening now. So the new normal, maybe this is the new normal, and it will help us get to a more sustainable place. Anyone has anything to add?
I think,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this, we keep mentioning the financial crisis in 2008. I mean, this is a whole different beast, I mean, people are being forced to think about this one, They're sitting at home and they've got time to think. So, I think there might be a bit of a spike of activity afterwards, but I think people, things will change.
Yeah, and I think for myself, it's very much about self-empowerment, because before this all happened, I mean, I've hardly had any time for myself, and time to reflect on what's most important and prioritize it. There's already enough negative impact in the rest of the world because of action, or also emotionally it's very draining of us thinking what's happening outside our doorstep. But that's also very good for us to take a moment to really think, how can really re-engage ourselves with others, to be more positively, think positively.
Exactly, and I think art during this time is something that can bring so much positivity. So whilst we talk about sustainability in art, I think also art will be something that brings us through this challenging time. And I think we can all still engage with art and carrying on in the commercial roles that we're all in, but do it in a way which is having less of a negative impact on the planet, just by making very small changes and thinking about the decisions that we're making.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to Zoom meet all of you, and to everybody out there that's listening, thank you. And if you have any more questions, I'm sure you can add. Oh, there is one. Oh, thank you, Frankie. And yes, I think you can ask any extra questions on Instagram or on the Power Art Hong Kong website. So thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.